talk about work requirements, remember, we want to take from people from poverty to jobs. We want to take, it's only for people who are able-bodied with no dependents. I don't think it's right that we borrow money from China to pay somebody that has no dependents, able-bodied, to sit on a couch. What we find is people become more productive.
So that's still a red line for you?
Every study has shown it helps the economy, helps people, and it helps our supply chain, make us less dependent on China.
We worked for months in putting together a coalition to pass a bill that actually addresses the debt ceiling. It also addresses Washington's spending problem. And what is the answer that we're seeing in these last few days from Joe Biden? Again, continuing to run out the clock, not bringing serious ideas to the table, but actually bringing in new ideas that are non-starters. The president's actually talking about more tax hikes. We've made it very clear from the beginning, we're not going to raise taxes. Joe Biden did that in his first 2 years, and look at how that's worked out. I think it's important to point this out as Joe Biden is talking about raising taxes. Look at some of the taxes that Joe Biden has already signed into law to raise on hardworking families. These tax increases under Joe Biden's first 2 years in office are some of the reason that inflation is so high. Some of the reason why energy costs are so high for families, 40% more for household electricity rates. And people would ask, why is that? Well, in part it's because Joe Biden added $6.5 billion in taxes on natural gas. That is a direct tax increase on low and middle income families, breaking his pledge that anybody making under $400,000 a year wouldn't pay a dime in new taxes. Well, I guess he was right about the dime, because it's a lot more than a dime in new taxes than that families are paying. And I'm talking about families making under $60,000 a year who are paying this natural gas tax. You know what other tax Joe Biden signed into law that low-income families are also paying? $12 billion in crude oil taxes. So you wonder, when people go fill up their car, they're paying 50% more in gasoline costs, in part because of Joe Biden's new tax there. And what is their answer? To try to kill the combustion engine. We actually have a bill this week to reverse the EPA's crazy idea of getting rid of heavy lift cars, your F-250 or other pickup trucks. They're going after all gasoline-powered cars in exchange for cars that ultimately contain a lot of components that are made in China. I don't call it his green agenda, I call it his red agenda, because the solar panels, a lot of the components of windmills, EVs, all made in China. And so the president keeps taxing those low-income families. $1.2 billion coal tax, $74 billion stock tax, which hits 401ks. Now, maybe President Biden thinks only the billionaires have 401ks. I hate to tell you, Mr. President, there are a lot of low-income families and middle-income families who have 401ks and are relying on that to be part of their nest egg to retire. And yet Joe Biden added $74 billion in taxes there. And as if that wasn't enough, Joe Biden signed into law $225 billion in more corporate taxes. And where do corporate taxes get paid? By people who buy things. Again, you wonder why when you go to the grocery store or when you go to any other store to buy clothes, to buy any other products, why it's costing 20 or 30% more. It's because all of the taxes that Joe Biden's already raised. And what is his answer to maxing out the nation's credit card? He wants more taxes. Well, the message we have for President Biden is there will be no more taxes. It's the spending in Washington that's the problem, and it's the spending in Washington that we have to address to solve this situation we're in with the debt ceiling. That's why we passed a bill to do it. We passed a bill, the Senate won't even come in to go to work, let alone try to pass their own bill. It's time for President Biden to get serious, bring real ideas to the table, or just say, Speaker McCarthy, the House passed a bill, President Biden ought to support it. And then that bill can get signed into law, and then this whole crisis he's trying to create is over. With that, we'll take some questions.
get done was,